How do the Texans make the playoffs? How do they win the AFC South? What does Houston need to do in the final two? Welcome into the channel. I'm Cody Stoots. Let's talk some Texans. Which results get the Texans into the playoffs over the final 2 weeks? Which ones win them the AFC South? They need a little help with that one. We'll apply the tiebreakers as needed when we go through it here. Some of these tiebreakers get very convoluted and crazy. Don't worry. I'm going to make this easy as pie to understand. If this, then that. That's how we'll go through it here. Would appreciate a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Let's get into it. 17-18 in the NFL season, week 17 and 18. Here's how it shakes out for the three teams in the AFC South that have the inside track on two spots in the AFC playoffs. One spot's going to go to the AFC South champion. That's most likely the 4 seed. And one spot's going to go to the most likely to be 7th seed, which is a wild card spot. The Texans have the Titans and the Colts. The Colts have the Raiders and the Texans. And the Jaguars have the Panthers and the Titans for their final 2 games. So which of these results leads to the Texans ending up in the playoffs? Which of these results leads to the Texans ending up with the AFC South Championship? Well, the first one we're going to go through is the lose-lose scenario, where the Texans lose both their games. Now, I'm sure there's some wild, crazy permutation that explains, oh, no, the Texans can still make the playoffs if they lose both of their games. I don't know it off the top of my head. The computers barely know it right now, and I just don't believe it to be anywhere close to a likely outcome that the Texans would lose, and make the playoffs. I don't believe it to be likely that the Texans are even going to lose. So this is a scenario that is possible, but it's not one we're going to spend a tremendous amount of time on. This obviously gives the Colts a chance to make the playoffs. It puts the Jacksonville Jaguars into the playoffs as well, or into the playoff hunt at least as well. It's a disaster. We'd all be feeling really bad. We'd all be feeling really mad. And we probably wouldn't get the bad taste out of our mouth until September of 2024. Again, wanted to address it. Not likely. Let's get into the realistic ones. Let's get into the one I believe is likely to happen. It's the win-win scenario for the Texans. Win-win and you're at least in. That's right. Win-win and you're at least in. Nothing that happens with the Colts, nothing that happens with the Jaguars matters as far as making the playoffs if you win-win. Win-win and you're in, at least as the 7th seed for the Texans. In this scenario, they go win-win and Jacksonville goes win-win. Now, the two teams split the season series. They'd have the same record at the end of the year. Jacksonville would win on tiebreaker number 2, which is that of a AFC South divisional record. They'd only have 1 loss in the AFC South. The Texans would have 2 losses in the AFC South matchups. Thus, Jacksonville finds themselves the AFC South champions, and the Texans find themselves in the wild card with this win-win scenario. With this win-win scenario, Jacksonville loses one of their final 2 games. Well, a loss and a win, or a win and a loss, combined with 2 Texans victories, has the Texans winning the AFC South. No tiebreakers needed. They finish with a better record than Jacksonville, and they are AFC South champions once again. Get to hang a banner, okay? This one is unlikely, I would say. This is probably the most likely scenario. Win-win and Jacksonville goes win-win. Okay, but 1 loss by Jacksonville, 2 wins by the Texans, AFC South champions, and a very fun finish to the season. And, of course, the 4 spot in the AFC, likely in a matchup against the Cleveland Browns at NRG Stadium again, which we can talk about that next week or as it draws closer. Now, this is another AFC South championship scenario. This is loss-win, and then Jacksonville loses their 2 games that they have left, and the Colts lose to the Raiders as well. This gives the Texans the best record in the AFC South. This gives the Texans the 4 seed in the AFC playoff picture, and this gives national talking heads a conversation about, should we change the playoff seeding and the way the teams are making the playoffs because the Texans have a bad record and they're ranked high. Get out of here. We don't need any of that. We don't want any of that. But I'll take this. It's not fun. It's not as fun as win-win. But AFC South champions hang a banner. This would be pretty good. So let's go through another lose-win scenario for the Texans. So again, any loss to the Colts essentially eliminates the Texans. But a loss to the Titans, win over the Colts, that also eliminates the Texans. You're saying, how, Cody? This looks like the Texans should be in the playoffs. This looks like they're headed to the playoffs. Well, the unfortunate aspect of lose-win is at that point, all these teams have the same record. Because look, the Jaguars went 1-1 here. Okay? All these teams have the same record. You lose the tiebreaker to Jacksonville. We already went over that. You would lose tiebreaker 4 to the Indianapolis Colts. That's right, tiebreaker 4. Tiebreaker 1's head-to-head. It'd be 1-1. Tiebreaker 2 is divisional record. You'd have the same. Again, this would hurt the Texans a ton. Okay, and this loss, win with the Colts, same AFC South record, same divisional record. So, tiebreaker there. Common opponents between the two teams. That's right, common opponents between the two teams. That would also be a tie. I went through, I did the research, I looked at it today. That would also be a tie. 8 common opponents between the teams. Not the divisional opponents, but 8 common opponents, non-divisional, and you would tie there. Then it would go to conference record, and that's where the Colts would have the advantage in this scenario over the Texans. So you lose the tiebreaker to the Colts, you lose the tiebreaker to the Jaguars, and as it says here, feels bad going home. Not ideal, not good, not something that you want to experience if you're the Texans. So take care of business and don't let it happen. This scenario is pretty interesting. It's not a control your own destiny scenario, but it's still pretty likely to find themselves in the playoffs, the Houston Texans. So a loss to the Titans and a win against the Colts make the wild card maybe. And I say make the wild card maybe because in this scenario, Jacksonville has won both their games and they've won the AFC South. Then you get to the Texans, and if they go 1-1 in their final 2, they've got a 9-8 record. The same record that likely the Pittsburgh Steelers would have, the Cincinnati Bengals would have, a chance for some other teams to get to 9-8. And the positive for the Texans is if it's 9-8 and it's deciding one playoff spot, you'd have the tiebreaker over the Pittsburgh Steelers. You beat them. That's a head-to-head tiebreaker. You'd have the tiebreaker over the Cincinnati Bengals. You beat them. But 2-0 by the Steelers, they'd have a better record than you. They're in. 2-0 by the Bengals, they'd have a better record than you. They're in. There's some other tiebreakers that are super unlikely, like involving the Raiders, but doesn't seem like they'd be fighting the Texans for that final spot. Don't believe they're winning both of their last games. The Texans losing both of their last games would actually be something on the Raiders getting involved because they're one game behind the Texans right now. But this would give you 9-8, and it'd be wild card maybe. I could even go as far as say make the wild card in a likely scenario because you own some of those tiebreakers. But ultimately, you don't want this one to be the case that you deal with. You'd much rather just go win, and at least you're in. That's the scenario that matters the most, but we've gone through those other ones here for the Texans as well. If I've missed a scenario, hit that comment section down below. Let me know. Hey, Cody, what about this scenario? Are the Texans in? I'll certainly answer that for you. Do my best to explain why I believe the Texans would be in or be out in that scenario. The comment section for whatever you want to talk about, always live here on the channel. Get down there and hang out. On your way down to the comment section, stop off in the description, learn about our friends over at J Bar M. J Bar M, fantastic barbecue in Edo here in Houston. They do a great job day in and day out. They got something special for you on New Year's Eve. That's right, New Year's Eve. You go to J Bar M, you get the whole hog experience at J Bar M. They're going to give you a ton of food, a free beer, watch the Texans ring in the new year with some incredible food at J Bar M. The link to the ticket for the Whole Hog event on New Year's Eve is in the description down below. Check them out. Incredible barbecue, great service, unbeatable atmosphere. J Bar M in Edo. On your way down in the description, throw me that thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Hit the bell so you don't miss anything that goes on here on the channel. I hope that these playoff explainers weren't too terribly complicated. My goodness, I had to do some math, and I was racking the brain trying to figure some of these out, but hopefully I made it nice and easy for you to understand. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I appreciate you watching, and I can't wait till we talk Texans again soon.